Life comes with a lot of decisions, and it can be hard to know the right path sometimes. A therapist can help you map out what you really want, so you trust yourself to make great choices and feel excited about the future. BetterHelp offers convenient professional online therapy on your schedule, however you want it, by phone, chat, or video call. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/positive today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/positive.
Looking for an adventure? Find yours in a Toyota. Like a Camry with stylish design and a reputation for reliability that can't be beat. Or go with a Corolla, both affordable and capable. With so many trims and features to choose from. Or check out the new Crown, presenting you with luxurious style and elegant amenities to make your day a breeze. No matter your adventure, Toyota has you covered. Visit buyatoyota.com for more. Toyota, let's go places.
This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Welcome back in, everybody. Congratulations to Shannon for winning our HTO giveaway, courtesy of us here at Sports Daily. A couple free iced tea cards for Shannon. Welcome back. It is hour number 2. I'm Jacob Albrock alongside Tommy Castor. Chad Chambers producing it. We've been talking a lot of football in the first hour. It wasn't even really where we expected to go. But let's talk a little Major League Baseball. And we will start with the Royals here. Tommy, there's an interesting development for the Royals, and it's Maikel Garcia. If you listen to the Royals here on KFH, which I typically do when I'm driving around, there is a buzz growing for young Maikel Garcia, 23 years old, who is as hot as really any hitter in baseball over the last week or so. He's showing something to us here. He's striking out a little bit too much. But, man, he's looking like he can play at this level defensively and offensively. Things look pretty good. And in seasons where we just look for glimmers of hope, Maikel Garcia could be giving us one. He's looked pretty good.
Yeah, he has. He's basically been really the only Royals player that I think you look at. I mean, maybe outside of Bobby Witt Jr., but you look at there could be something here with this guy. It's a small sample size. He's gotten hot recently, so I don't want to, jump to conclusions on him, but at least recently from what we've seen, it looks pretty good.
I mean, he's hitting 280 through 45 games. He has 11 steals. You project, that out, and you're looking at around 40 steals. He's not going to hit for much power, but boy, if he can get on base and run wild a little bit, that you'll take it at this point, won't you? Like he's got defensive versatility. Maybe it's a piece, and he's not a piece they're going to consider trading or anything like that, but maybe it's a piece that could be a part of the future. And I think that's what we have to look for with the Royals right now. Bobby Witt Jr.'s quote unquote struggles are so vastly overstated. Bobby Witt Jr. is just fine. Like he's going to be fine. He's been good. He's on pace this year to, have 25 home runs, about 80 RBIs. He's still striking out a little bit too much, right? He doesn't hit for enough average.
The average isn't great. The average is not great. I mean,
it's not.
That's going to be the knock on him right now, right?
It's going to be the knock. So it's the thing that you look at, like when you look at him, because I don't know that anybody thought he was going to be like a 300 hitter, but he's got to be like a 265, 270 hitter, I think, ultimately, to get to his supreme potential. He was a 250 hitter last year as a rookie. He's hitting 245 this year, basically just a tick under on all his slash lines, but he's stealing far more bases. He's striking out at about the same clip. He's walking just a little bit more, which that got better in June and has gotten better, so I'm interested to watch that. RBIs are about the same. Home runs will be about the same. So he's slashing just a little bit less. He's running a little bit more, but I think what we're seeing is it's, after a really slow start, right? He's kind of catching fire a little bit, and I won't be surprised if he doesn't end this year closer to like 260, a better walk to strikeout ratio than he had a year ago. And really, as we talk about his ultimate, ascension, those are sort of the two things that I looked at anyway. Get better on your slash lines, walk more than you walked last year, strike out less than you struck out last year, and I'm probably good with whatever. Now he's running more. That's a nice development. I think that has a lot to do with everybody running more, but he's got it in the tank. I think he's fine this year, by the way. I have very little concern about Bobby Witt Jr., for what it's worth. But Michael Garcia is really interesting now as he has entered in, and we look for things to watch, and you don't have a lot of hope for some of the names in the past. MJ Melendez struggles, and who's in that lineup that's going to help you long term. Well, that's another guy. I don't know if there's any pitchers there, but at least we got somebody else in the lineup here for the Royals long term.
You hope so. I mean, you cross your fingers that he is. We don't know that yet, and that's what I want to go back and I want to make sure that we pump the brakes a little bit with Garcia. Yeah. I mean, because it's been good, right? But it's really, really early, and so I just want to be cautious on that. And with Bobby Witt Jr., I think my only concern is him being a victim of the expectations a little bit. I mean, I think everybody that has watched him play, watched him come up through the system, join the organization, they have placed the Royals' future on Bobby Witt Jr.'s shoulders. And that's probably fair. Those are probably fair expectations. I just want to make sure that he's not a victim of his own not his own expectations, but the expectations that the Royals fan base and the front office and everybody has for him. Because, I think that it wasn't that long ago. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. We had an entire discussion about whether or not Witt Jr. was having a sophomore slump, and his slash line was okay. It wasn't like he was having a terrible year, and there was conversations about a sophomore slump. So I want to make sure that, if he doesn't bat 300 and have an OPS over 900 and, hits for 40 home runs and drives in 120 runs, that we don't look at him and say, oh, he's a failure. I want to make sure that he's not a victim of those expectations.
He never, he hit, so he spent, I guess, just a year in the, he had the rookie league, right, where he didn't play a whole lot. And then he had his 2021 season in Double-A, and then he got called up to Triple-A, which sort of surprised people. But in that season, he hit 290, right? So it's not like the average is what was making people salivate about his potential. It was the power and speed and defensive ability, in slugging and OPS and stuff. It wasn't necessarily the batting average. He's essentially doing what he did last year with a little more speed.
Right.
It's just, to me, it's the strikeouts. So can you get more selective? Because the second he's more selective, starts to convert some of those strikeouts into walks, everything else is going to come up, rise up. That's what happens in baseball, right? That's what makes the great hitters great, is they don't swing at bad pitches, with some exception, right? But for the most part. And so I have no concern about Bobby Witt Jr. I think Bobby Witt Jr., honestly, Tommy, is a victim of everybody else not being good. I think if the Royals were even at low expectations and not below everybody's expectations, which they are, then we wouldn't be trying to grasp at straws. It wouldn't feel so desperate with Bobby Witt Jr.
At that point, if he is basically doing what he did last year, his slash line is comparable to last year. He's stealing more bases. He's striking out a little bit more. But overall, it's very comparable to what he did a year ago. But yet the conversation is he having a sophomore slump? You're saying that's basically because the entire team is bad? Or is it because the expectations are so great for him and we haven't seen just taking the world by storm with Bobby Witt Jr. that kind of plays into it?
Both. I think we are absolutely desperate for something with the Royals. So that's amplifying just a little bit what we're seeing, right? And I think that it just gets tough because his peers also don't help. So we've had this recent trend in years where guys, and it's not a lot, it's really what, 3, right, with Acuna and Tatis and Soto as they came up, who just at an extraordinarily young age lit the league on fire and in some cases have continued to do so. Okay. That's not the norm, though, and most baseball players take a couple of years and then they sort of hit their stride. I think that Bobby Witt Jr. is on that path. Like, I don't think we're to the point with Bobby Witt Jr. where it's like, okay, I don't know if he's going to develop into what he... I feel like he's right on the path to develop into exactly what we all thought he's going to be, right? Which is a perennial all-star who can be the face of this organization for a long time. I think that's exactly the trajectory he's on right now. I haven't really seen anything that wavers from that. Like, I don't get the, because I sense some panic, and I think the panic comes in that everything is, our pets' heads are falling off, right? Like, everything's going wrong. Bobby Witt Jr. is not even going to be good. Like, what are we going to do? No, I think Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be fine. He's getting no help in the lineup. The team stinks. So it's going. You just gotta he's okay. I think Bobby Witt Jr. is fine.
Yeah, why in the world would you give Bobby Witt Jr. anything to hit if you're an opposing pitcher? It's not like there's anybody else in the lineup that's going to be able to do anything to drive him in. So at that point, if you're an opposing pitcher, I mean, the game plan is like, hey, let's just work around him because.
Especially too if he's not selective either. Right, like
right,
if
for
he's
sure, because
shown
he's
you that he'll swing at bad pitches.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So that's got to be the strategy, for opposing teams. And look at the teams that, like you mentioned Acuna and you mentioned Tatis Jr. Those two guys, opposing pitchers can't work around because the rest of the lineup is dangerous enough for both the Padres and the Braves that you're going to hurt yourself, by going to whoever's next in the lineup on both of those teams. That's not the case with the Royals. It's Bobby Witt Jr. or bust. And so I think that that's probably part of it too. I hope that as his career continues, and as the year rolls on, I mean, we're getting into a point in the year where, like you mentioned at the top of the show, we're getting into trade deadline talk and who the Royals can move and who they can't move. I guarantee you, and I don't know how large of a contingent it is, but I guarantee you there's a contingent of Royals fans, because it's the whole our pets are falling off, the sky is falling, everything is terrible. They might be thinking that Bobby Witt Jr. could be better off on another team and get a haul of prospects back. I don't believe that at this point, and I don't think it's going to happen. But I'm sure that there probably are some folks out there that think, hey, we're going to be better served by trying to rebuild this franchise completely from the ground up, from the foundation up. And so that's going to be, I'm really interested to see how the Royals do approach the trade deadline.
They're gonna have a fire sale. This is the year. I mean, you don't have. There is nothing really outside of Bobby Witt Jr., Pasquantino, and now I think Maikel Garcia that holds you back from trading anyone. Is there? Like, at this point, you're not really clinging to anything. And we know that Salvador Perez, as much as it pains us, is probably a part of that too. I don't know what else there is to do. Like, there's not anything there. And what will have to happen is they have to get some of these right, and they're going to have to try to have a really solid free agency to get things back to respectability while they take care of things. Because you can't waste Bobby Witt Jr., right? And the other thing about Bobby Witt Jr., by the way, he's so mentally equipped to be fine in his development and deal with this. But, like, it's frustrating for some young players to get a grasp on the fact that good, experienced Major League Baseball pitchers, if you swing at bad pitches, are totally fine to walk you and never give you a good pitch until you continuously show them you won't swing at it.
Right.
Like, if I'm a vet Major League Baseball pitcher and I'm playing the Royals, I am totally content never giving Bobby Witt Jr. a pitch to hit.
For sure.
Like,
How confident
never.
I get that, and I totally agree with you. How confident are you in the Royals coaching staff to help him develop that eye? Because outside of the talent that Bobby Witt Jr. possesses, isn't that a concern?
But he doesn't need his coaching staff to. I'm telling him that. Like, he doesn't need that. That's very obvious. Like, his coaching staff, I hope, is working on more than just saying, "Now don't swing at bad pitches, Bobby." Right. Like, I'm telling him that. That's not something he needs a coaching staff for. How much confidence do I have in anybody on this coaching staff? Oh, I don't know, somewhere between 0 and 0. None at all. Like, it's gotten worse. I don't know how anybody has confidence. What was already bad got worse with the same players. So I know everybody, and we've had this discussion too. I know everybody say, "Oh, you can't do it that fast. You can't." Yes, you can. When it went from bad to worse. Because if it was that bad before and now it's worse, I don't know what else to look at. It's the same players that got worse.
Then what in the world is the front office waiting on then? I mean, and I know that it might be a bad look to let your brand new manager go.
Good question.
Even before the All-Star break. But if there's zero confidence in that and they're worse than they were a year ago with the exact same roster, what are they waiting for? If it's going to be a fire sale anyway, what in the world are they waiting for?
That's a really good question. I don't know. Again, here's the part of it, because I think I said this the last time we talked about it. I have not been in this locker room. So when Ned Yost was there and people were, clamoring for Ned Yost and, oh my God, he's too old school. I was in those locker rooms. I was following that team closely, like boots on the ground level. And, man, that team was all in for Ned Yost. It was every time you talk to him. So that piece of it, I don't have a grasp on like I used to. That's the part I don't know. If everybody is feeling the desperation for this staff and everybody else, like, God, this is our fault. That's a little bit different, and I do think you have to be careful because you do have to think of the long-term morale of your team, especially in the short term, if you're making decisions like that. Now, at some point, more like in the offseason, if the results aren't there, you also need to send a message to your team. Like, this is unacceptable, and this is not okay.
Nationals baseball is in full swing.
Strike 3 called. He got him looking. That's 10 strikeouts for Mackenzie Gore.
With the free Odyssey app, local fans can listen live all summer long, whether you're at the grill or at the pool.
Going, and gone. Goodbye. C.J. Abrams, a grand slam.
Nationals baseball. Nationals announcers streaming live on the free Odyssey app. AUDACY. Get in the game and download it today.
And we're going to make changes until we get this right. So that's where I think the timing gets a little bit interesting. I don't know what grasp of the locker room Quatraro has. Have zero insight there. That makes it a little trickier for me. Whereas when it was Ned Yost, and it was, 2014, and people were clamoring, and they didn't do things at the deadline, but I had been there a few times covering them, and I was like, God, I don't know, guys. Like, this team they've got something in this locker room that's like there's a special component to it, and you don't mess with that. And they didn't, and it turned out all right, and it was good fortune and all those things that led to then some crazy successes. But that makes it tricky to know in season what you do. If this team is just not performing, but they want to be a part of what it is that then now's probably not the time, because what good is it going to do? Nobody's going to go in there and all that. I mean, they may win a few more games with somebody. I don't know, but I'm fine with them writing it out through this season and then seeing what happens. But at that point, then you make the message very clear. Like, this is absolutely unacceptable and not going to work for us.
I think that having some kind of strategy on what things look like after this season. I mean, of course, we all know the season is done. It's a lost year. They're not coming back. It's bad, right? But having a strategy on what happens after this season is really important, not only from a player development and roster outlook, but also a coaching staff outlook. And so if it's not Matt Quatraro, who is it? Who is the right fit, for this franchise to lead a young team? And that was the That's what everybody was sold on with Quattrero from the beginning, was that he comes from the Rays organization. They know how to do more with less. They know how to use analytics. They know how to get the best out of young players. That's really what everybody was told about Quattrero coming in and being the new leader of this franchise. If that's not working, then do you change course? And if you do change course, what do you change course to? And that's a John Sherman question. Investing in players, investing in coaches, and the right manager. So I don't know. I don't know what that strategy is. That's above my pay grade. The people who make those decisions make a whole lot more money than me. But if you're going to do a fire sale at the trade deadline, and you're going to do a hard reset outside of a couple of players here and there, you got to have a long-term strategy on exactly what is the vision and what is the direction of this franchise.
I don't think anybody knows what that is. So this weekend we're talking about the A's because Rob Manfred is being a turd again with the A's fans and trying to blame the A's fans and the city of Oakland for them moving to Vegas instead of where the blame needs to go, which is to that front office, who is very obviously and clearly not trying to win because they don't want to spend any money. I think it's important when we talk about the Royals. We are not to the point for me where I would say the Royals are not trying to win. In fact, I think it's the Royals trying to win longer when maybe they shouldn't have that's ultimately led to all of this, right? They tried to hang on to that core. Really, it was for one extra season, which at the time, man, I remember asking that question. Like, we're going to have to make a decision here. Like, do you appreciate this front office for giving the fans one more year of this group that they care so deeply for and trying to run it back one more time, or should they be more cutthroat and trade all these guys? Like, you can't have both. And they did try, and it was a valiant effort, and now they're paying consequences, right? They didn't maximize that in a small market environment. So that they spent some money to do that, by the way. It's very different what we're seeing this year with the Royals and what we're seeing this year from the A's. The Royals are not in this situation because they have tried to win. They've just gotten it wrong. That is different than not trying at all. Not trying at all is far more sinister, is far more, infuriating. As a fan, it sucks because you want your team to be good, but the Royals just haven't gotten the players right in the draft, right? And so we'll see. I don't. The light at the end of the tunnel just isn't there right now. But when at least the group is going to make an effort somehow, okay, it didn't make a lot of sense to spend a ton of money this offseason. I don't have a whole lot of issue with that. I have more issue with what was bad got worse with essentially a lot of the same players. That's a concern for me. But it's not like Oakland. It's not like what's happening in Oakland right now.
Yeah, it's apples and oranges. Any Royals fan that feels like the sky is falling, and you know what, to an extent it is. The play on the field has been terrible. But look at Oakland and then tell me that things are really, really terrible, because you're not at risk of losing your franchise in Kansas City right now. Like, that's not happening. In fact, they're talking about a new stadium in downtown Kansas City. So that's not happening. You don't have a situation where your owner has just given up, like what's happening in Oakland. So as bad as things are, and let's face it, things are bad. It could always be worse. And there's a team out in California that proves that right now, that things could always be worse.
And it's significantly, not even comparably worse.
Yep.
The Royals are going to have to take an off season and all this and spend a little money. That's the hard part. And I think that they were willing to do that. The challenge is going to be now you have to spend it with pitching. I think the hope has always been that you've developed enough pitching that you can go spend a little on the lineup. But when you have to spend it on pitching, I don't know. The Rangers, go look at what they're doing. That's how you spend on pitching. The Royals can't spend like that.
Yeah, and I also wonder, Kansas City's right now is probably not a super attractive free agent destination, right? So I think they're going to have trouble attracting high quality free agents, even if they want to spend
because there's
the money.
no chance you'll be a winner.
Exactly.
Yeah. The money's going to have to talk. And that's on John Sherman if he wants to build a new stadium downtown. That's your challenge now, right? You're going to have to at some point supplement this with some decent free agents because it's not like there's not enough good young players to turn it around quickly right now. 869-1240. We're talking a little Major League Baseball. Let's look elsewhere. Something I don't think we've done even yet this year. We'll take a look at the standings. Who's for real going to contend and win this thing, potentially? And who's going to be the most active at the trade deadline? We'll talk about it all on Sports Daily as we roll through this Monday. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. It's Albrecht, it's Caster, Tommy, Major League Baseball. We are both fortunate enough that our, other teams that we don't follow professionally, but that we follow as fans are pretty good right now. The Braves, the Rangers. Right now, CBS Sports has the Braves in their power rankings at 1, the Rangers at 3. They're 2 of the 3, really 2 of the 4 best teams by record right now in Major League Baseball. As we look across the landscape, I think it's pretty hard to take anybody over Atlanta right now. Cincinnati's fun. They've got on that long win streak, and now they've lost a couple. I don't know who else, honestly. I think we think the Dodgers will be there, right? Maybe Arizona continues it, but it's the Braves right now, and I think their path is, as the top seed in the top team in the National League, is pretty clear. They seem like there's quite a bit of distance between them and everybody else.
Yeah, I think so. I think the big question is going to be how will their rotation hold up? Max Fried is on the injured list. Michael Soroka, they brought him back and really didn't go very well with him in a couple of starts, and now he's back in the minors. They've got, some pitchers that they've had to call up from the minors to try to get them through this stretch with some injuries in their rotation. So I think that's going to be the big question, but their lineup is rock solid. Matt Olson had a great weekend against the Reds, and he is now tied with Shohei Ohtani for the most home runs in Major League Baseball, which I probably wouldn't have predicted at the beginning of the year. I wouldn't have said, hey, it's going to be Shohei Ohtani and Matt Olson leading the majors in home runs. But here we are. Of course, they've got Acuna, they've got Albies, they've got Riley. They've got a pretty potent lineup.
They're they're the gold standard right now for the way to build a team and maintain it. They've done both of those things very well. Okay, so we go to the American League. Man, I feel like it is a jumbled mess in the American League. I think you've got 4 legitimate contenders in just the AL East alone: Tampa, Baltimore, the Yankees, and Toronto. Boston is respectable.
They're all over 500.
But those 4 others in that division, to me, seem like they could all win a World Series, right? The Central's not very good. I don't know how that shakes out. It's just going to sort of be a battle of attrition. But even then in the West, I don't know how you can't consider Houston there as always. Texas is very obviously there right now with this, historic for them run differential. And then you've got the Angels, who I think probably should be, in the mix. And I do think Seattle will still, by the end of this, will be in the mix. I still am on the Mariners. I think they've got to get going in the right direction. But there are, at minimum, to me, 8 teams in the American League that could win a World Series this year. And I happen to cheer for one that feels like they're in really good position, but man, this AL race is like, if the National League is 1 and everybody else, I don't even think I would put the Rays as 1. I don't think I'd put anybody as a clear 1. I think you just sort of have 8 teams that are all going to just jockey a little bit for position. And that brings us to that trade deadline, which seems like just highly critical this year.
Yeah, and I really am interested in knowing which teams in the American League specifically are willing to take a big gamble and be buyers at the trade deadline to try to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. Historically, I don't feel like the Rays really do that, right? Like they're typically, if memory serves, not usually big time buyers at the deadline. So I wonder if they stand pat, for the most part. But you look at teams, specifically in the AL East outside of the Rays, like the Orioles or the Yankees. The Yankees are always going to be busy at the trade deadline. That's what they do. And there's kind of some discontent growing amongst the fan base with the Yankees. So, it makes me wonder, who's going to be really, really active at the trade deadline in the American League.
The Rangers will be, because they've sort of been circling the wagons for this moment. They've got to replace DeGrom probably, and their bullpen is not very good. So I think they're going to go get at least a starter and 2 relievers, and you can almost put that in pen. Like they're going to be active.
Yeah.
I think the Angels, if they're in the mix, reek of desperation and probably also will be. And I think that the Blue Jays would be the other team that sort of is desperate. I think those are the 3, and you nailed it with the Yankees, so maybe there's 4. I think there are 4 desperate type teams to capitalize on this, and it would be the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Rangers, and the Angels. I think everybody else would be fine to stand pat. I mean, everybody will probably do little things. It doesn't make a lot of sense for Tampa or Baltimore at this point to be overly aggressive, but it makes absolute sense for those other teams to be ultimately aggressive and try and push all your chips into the middle of the table now. I think it's going to be – I think we're going to have – and the thing that's been weird about Major League Baseball this year is it's June 26th, Tommy, and I don't know, we haven't heard a lot of the chatter of, who are those massive names that are going to be dealt. And the fact that there are so many teams in contention in the American League makes that a little bit complicated, quite frankly. There aren't all those teams that might have those star players who would normally get traded are all sort of in the mix. Now you have more teams vying for it. And I bring all of this up because to me it feels like a seller's market this year. It feels like a seller's market because there are a lot of teams in the mix and a lot of teams that are willing to give up a lot to get a little bit to put them over the edge. Enter the Royals into this conversation. The Royals, in reality, have a hitter in Salvi that can help anybody, right? As a DH or a catcher or a first baseman. He can help anybody if that's the way the Royals choose to go and he's willing to accept that. They also have 2 of the more attractive, I think, bullpen pieces in the fact that, maybe your team doesn't need a closer. If it does, Barlow has been good at that. But maybe you just need some ammo in the bullpen. That's where Barlow and Chapman are absolutely ammo in anybody's bullpen. I think the Royals enter in a pretty good place here in a seller's market with some clear tradable assets where they can help some people.
Yeah, I think so too. And we know that more than likely they are going to be sellers at the deadline. Yeah. You talk about the Royals and you talk about that division. Minnesota is in first place and they're a game over 500. So all you have to do if you're a team in that division, so if you're Minnesota or if you're, I guess, Cleveland, they're a couple of games under 500. All you got to do is win the division and you're going to get in the playoffs and hopefully you can get hot. So I wouldn't be surprised to look at a team like Minnesota potentially as a team that would maybe want to jump in and try to grab a couple of pieces. Not to be, the best in the league, but at least just the best in the division, in a really bad division, to win and move on to the playoffs. That would be another team that I would look at potentially wanting to be buyers.
Maybe Edward Olivares becomes a tradable asset. I don't know what else there is for the Royals, but yeah, I don't know. In the Central, but the only thing about the Central to me right now is the Twins would probably be the team that would be willing to get the most active, I think. I don't know that anybody else, because we know Cleveland's not going to do it.
Yeah.
The White Sox probably aren't going to be close enough.
Right.
And Detroit's not quite ready yet. So if is it Minnesota or Cleveland? Minnesota will do it. But will Cleveland? And will Minnesota feel desperate enough to do it if they think they can win the division without it? I don't know.
Because all you got to do is win that division, right? You got to be better than the rest of the bad teams in the AL Central.
I think that I don't know. I think the activity comes out of the West and the East. Who would be active potentially in the National League? I think Cincinnati is one of the more interesting teams to watch in that regard. Milwaukee's always interesting because they've got top of the line rotation and they always feel like they could win, playoff series.
I think the Dodgers
Miami,
get active. I mean, they usually are pretty active at the deadline, and that division is really tough. The Giants are right ahead of them. The Diamondbacks are in first place right now, and the Dodgers, I think, they always feel like they need to be in the mix. But right now, they're battling for even a wild card spot, so I can see the Dodgers being buyers too.
Oh, the Giants and the Dodgers and the Padres, I think all three will be buyers. Arizona may feel pressure to then become a buyer, even though that's not what they're, really working for right now.
Are they for real, by the way? Do you think Arizona is a for real team?
Well, define for real. Like, do I think their ascension is real? Yes. Do I think when the season ends, they'll be better than all three of San Francisco, the Dodgers, and the Padres? I do not. But I do think this ascension is real, and that's what I mean. Like, they'll be interesting because do they feel any desperation now to continue? My gut says no, and my gut says they will continue to try and do what they're doing and just hope they're good enough to get there. Sort of like the Royals were in 2013 probably, right? 2014, like we like this young core. We like all these players. We don't really want to shake this up. And that may anger the fans a little bit, but I'm not sure that the best thing for Arizona to do is to go, dump a lot of assets to try this year. Even though it's there for you, I don't think you want to salvage the long-term potential for success there.
You're knocking on the doorstep. I mean, I disagree with you. I think they got to go all in right now because you're playing in a division with the Dodgers and the Giants and the Padres, who are always stacked and always willing to spend money. Strike while the iron is hot. There's no guarantee if you're the Diamondbacks that this kind of success will continue next year and the year after that and the year after that. So if I'm the Diamondbacks, you're 15 games over 500. You're playing great baseball. You've got a really, really talented young core and a guy that could more than likely win Rookie of the Year in Corbin Carroll. So I say you go for it right now. Push all your chips in. See if you can win a championship this year.
Okay, so here's why I don't know that. Like, you're going to take a rotation now. With Zach Gallen has been fantastic, right? Merrill Kelly has also been good, and that's it. So out of your starting rotation, right? Otherwise, it's you're getting by, right? Like you're surviving this thing a little bit. So if that's what your role, I think you have to be realistic. And unless you're going to go get like an elite frontline starter to go with those two guys, I think your chances are tough. So let's say you do that then. What's that going to take? Then now you're potentially compromising this nice young core offensively and everything else that you're putting together this season. And, Ketel Marte's not a young player, but, Walker and I don't know. They've got some guys. I just think it's going to be a tough decision to make because what's going to put them over the edge? It's another frontline starter. And another frontline starter is going to cost them a ton. And I just don't know that that's the right way to go yet if you're Arizona. Because what does 1 year do for you anyway, right? Like, let's say they win it this year, but then they set back their overall rebuild, and then this is it, and they win it this one time out of the next 5 years. Is that worth it for them? I don't know that I believe that it is.
But why roll the dice and, wait for next year, the, year after that? You're 15 games over 500 in a traditionally really difficult and powerful division, and you're leading it right now. And we know that teams like the Dodgers are going to come after you, and they're going to spend all the money in the world to try to get it done. Just keep riding that wave.
You're 2.5 and 3 games up on those two teams, and you've got to think San Diego. I just don't think it's the year. I don't think it. I mean, they look at the Braves. The Braves have held tight and held suit and done what they needed to do, and then they develop these young players. They lock them up. That's how you sustain success in Major League Baseball. Because I think when push comes to shove, if they need to, Arizona's probably not all that different from the Braves from a market perspective and what they can spend if the spending is right. I mean, that's what Atlanta showed us, right? Spend when the spending is right, and they've done that. Cincinnati, you can make the same case for Cincinnati that you're making with Arizona, except Cincinnati's in a much more winnable division than Arizona. And is anybody saying Cincinnati needs to run out and be these massive buyers? I mean, I don't know. Like, they've got so many good young players. Like, is that the right path for Cincinnati? I don't know that it is. So, and they probably have a better case to make to do that even than Arizona does.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't have an issue at all with Cincinnati wanting to be buyers either. I mean, I think that you've got teams that traditionally are not, and teams like the Reds and the Diamondbacks that we haven't talked about. They've been irrelevant for a long time. I'm watching the Braves and the Reds this weekend. They're playing in Cincinnati, and my wife walks in the room. And, you know, she's not a diehard baseball fan, but she follows the Royals and like that sort of thing. And I'm a Braves fan, so she watches that too. And she goes, "Who are the Reds?" I'm like, Cincinnati. She's like, "I've never heard of them." I'm like, "Well, they've been bad. They've been bad for a long time." So I think that you've got teams that we're starting to talk about again, that it's been a long time since they've been in the conversation. Why not roll the dice? If I'm the GM of the Reds or the Diamondbacks, I'm going to go all in right now. Like, I mean, why not? You strike while the iron is hot. You might as well just go for it.
Yeah, and because sometimes that's not the best thing to do.
There's no guarantee you'll ever be back there.
If you're building a certain way, but okay, so I don't know that I think it matters as much if you'll ever be back there as much as it does. You have to increase your chances to get back there. And for some teams, your best path to get back there, here's the question. It's one of my favorite questions in sports. What's better, one championship or one decade of being in the mix with no guarantee of that championship? And I know the popular thing is to say championship, but I don't
for sure.
But I don't think that's reality, because to me as a fan, we'll use the Royals as an example, even though they're not directly connected. Like, even as much fun as those 2 years were, and they were awesome, right? That was a blast. Having to go through this now for, what are we on, year 5, 6? That's worse. That's worse than the good. In baseball more than any other sport, by the way. I don't know that this is true for other sports, but in baseball, when you've got a season that lasts as long as it does, when you're counting on baseball to get you through that summer, being bad for 7-8 years is just, it's brutal.
Yeah, but if you would have told me that when they won the World Series in 2015, that we were going to have a really long and difficult and terrible stretch of Royals baseball, I think I still would have taken the championship.
Of almost 10 years?
I think so. I think I still would have taken that. I mean, because you can never take that away from them. They won in a market where it's so difficult to do so. They were at the very top of the mountain. I think I would take that. I think I would.
You would take that one championship instead of these 10 years, them being like a wild card contender every year.
Yeah, I think I would.
I don't think I would, and I think baseball's the only sport where I would say that, actually, because like in football for the Cowboys, no, I would have taken a championship instead of this mediocrity. But I'm not so sure mediocrity is a bad thing in baseball.
Ask any Chicago Cubs fan if they would have taken a championship over being in the mix. But they didn't win for 100 and some years. I think that, they're not good right now, and they've been in a rebuild for a long time that seems never ending. They won the championship in, 2016?
But they've been relevant. Any Cubs fan would tell you that
they would have taken that championship.
I know, but they've been relevant since. The Royals have been irrelevant, like total irrelevance. That's the worst. Irrelevant baseball is the worst. 869-1240. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. More Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back, everybody. It's all Brockton Caster kicking off another week here on Sports Daily. Feeling festive here. Let's give something away. How about some ticket vouchers for the Wichita Wind Surge? These will be good for any home game. We'll get a winner set up. You pick the game, you take the voucher, and you can select where it is that you want to go as far as the schedule goes. And we'll do that for our, let's do second caller, 869-1240. We will have Christy Bredbender on Wednesday. Right at the top of the program, we'll have our regularly scheduled guest. That'll be fun. Again, still trying to track down Paul Mills in a busy time in their year. A lot of time conflicts when we go in the morning and all the workouts and things are happening in the morning. So we'll try and get him in here. What would that be for the second time, Tommy, and check in on everything.
Yeah.
So, but we'll have Christy later this week, so we'll have that for you. We'll come back. We'll wrap up this Monday on Sports Daily right after this.